योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम्. So last time we looked at Sutra 3.21. कायरूप संयमा तद्ग्राह्य शक्ति स्तंभे चक्षुः प्रकाश असंप्रयोगे अंतर्धानम. So that was, we looked at the sutra as well as the bhashya. That was the fifth among the sanyamas dealt with in the Vibhuti-pada. Today we move on to Sutra 3.22, which is as follows. Sopakramaṃ nirupakramaṃ cha karma tatsaṃyamādaparāntajñānamariṣṭebhyo va. So we look at the terms in the sutra one by one to understand the sutra, and then we begin with the bhashya. So Sopakramaṃ nirupakramaṃ cha karma. So the karma here is categorized into two: Sopakramaṃ and Nirupakramaṃ. So what is that? So elsewhere we find this elaborated. Tadidam Sopakramaṃ Upakramaha. So what is Upakramaha? So Sopakrama means along with Upakrama, the one that has the Upakramas with it. So the karma that has Upakramas. Nirupakrama means the karma that does not have the Upakrama with it. So what is this Upakramam? Upakramaha Vyaparastat Sahitam Ityartaha. So Upakramaha means Vyaparaha. So Sopakramaha means Vyaparaha Tat Sahitam. So that is Sopakramam. So what is this Vyapara? Phaladānāya Vyapriyamanam. So one that can lead to the phala or the fruition. So in a nutshell it is said, Sopakramam tīvravegena phaladātru. Nirupakramancha mandavegena phaladātru. So Sopakramam is one that will bring about the fruition in a short time, will fructify quickly. Nirupakramam means one that will fructify after a long time. So that is mandavegena. And therefore this upakrama is the capability to bring about the fruition. So the karma is, the sutra says, is sopakramam or nirupakramam. There are two types. And then what? Tatsaṃyamād. When the yogi gets sanyama on this, sanyama we have seen several times, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, trayam ekatra sanyamaha, and how that leads to various type of jnanam and siddhi, etc. So tatsaṃyamād aparāntajñānam. So what is aparanta? Aparanta means it is mrityu or death. Now why is that known as aparāntajñānam? Or why is mrityu or maranam or death known as aparanta? So it is said, mahapralayam apekshaya aparanto maranam. So the complete going away is pralaya mahapralaya. So that is the para anta, the great end. The apara anta, which is the smaller end for a lifetime, is death or mrityu. So this is aparāntajñānam. So knowledge of death, or knowledge of what is known as aparanta, the smaller end of a lifetime. So sanyama on the sopakramam, on karma in general, which are sopakramam and nirupakramam, which bring about fruition quickly or bring about fruition after a long time. The sanyama on that leads to knowledge of aparantam, which is death. So aparanta jnanam. Ariṣṭebhyo va. Also through Arishta. By Arishta is generally referred to as omens or certain signs. So Ariṣṭebhyo va. Through these Arishtas, you may get certain indications of upcoming death. Okay. So that is what the sutra is saying. So this is another sanyama, and it's the siddhi from that, or what is the sakshatkara, what is the realization that comes from a certain type of sanyama. Just as a reminder, all these sanyamas are being listed with the context given that a yogi who has accomplished all the sadhans, the 8 ashtangas, or in general all the sadhanas of yoga, he has this wish to know, uh, which was referred to as bubutsa, the desire to know, and how the sutras are listing how the different sanyamas can bring about different types of realizations to the yogi, and this is one of that. So this is Sutra 3.22. Next we'll be seeing the Bhashya.
So we get a classification of karmas in this sutra: Sopakramaṃ, Nirupakramaṃ. Various other classifications of karma were considered when we were looking into karma siddhanta. So you heard the meaning of upakrama here. So there are 2 kinds based on upakrama factor: Sopakrama and Nirupakrama. So the karmas which commence with the fruition of it, those are called sopakrama, and the karmas which do not start with the fruition are nirupakrama. That means fruition will be taking place at a distant. And in sopakrama, the fruition commences with the very act. And this will be interesting with respect to we commoners, because many times we tend to feel that I have been doing very good deeds and acts in this life. So why is it that I'm suffering? I'm doing so good things, so many good things. But why is that I'm suffering? And that is, we are expecting the fruit of what we are doing now, here, in this life, now itself. But the thing is that we are facing the fruits of our karmas of past lives now, and we are committing karmas of which the fruition will be taking place at a distant future, perhaps in another life. And that is why many times a common man who is not familiar with the karma siddhanta is tormented for the fact that I am doing good deeds, but I am suffering bad fruits, bad consequences. And therefore, we tend to say that the God is partial, or the God is cruel, because despite my good deeds, I am suffering. And there are many people who are doing bad deeds, but they don't suffer. They are having a comfortable life. So this is because of not understanding that there are 2 kinds of karma: sopakrama, nirupakrama. So quickly fructifying karmas are sopakrama, and slowly, in a delayed point in time, fructifying karmas are nirupakrama. And these 2 kinds of karmas are again object of samyama. Yogi will be able to have samyama on these 2 kinds of karmas. The consequence of samyama is that there is aparāntajñānam. Aparāntajñānam, as you heard just now, the knowledge about one's own death. Now, this is a great bounty for a yogi who is aware of the death coming up. And therefore, he can carry out what is called as death management, which is so important. We commoners, we have no idea. We know that we are going to die, but we do not know when are we going to die. And therefore, we cannot be carrying out anything that can be called as death management. So it becomes accidental and sudden for us, our death. But yogi needs to do that, so he can do some karma vyavasthapanam. before he dies, and which is so important. So when the karmas are well managed before the death, that means the next life would be more properly laid out. Then Ariṣṭebhyo. Ariṣṭha means the portents, the death signals. Now the knowledge of death would only come by signals of death. So they are called portents. And these portents tell the yogi when will he have a death, how the death will come, where, when, how, why the death will come, and therefore he can strategize and work for death management. So it's a wonderful facility for a yogi, and thank God we don't have it, because we are mortals, timid mortals, and the knowledge of death or any pre-sight of death, pre-sign of death itself would torment us enormously. And perhaps our knowledge of death itself might be the cause of our death. This is what the case of mortals is, while the yogi is not afraid of death because of the klesha conquered or weakened, and the aparigraha. And therefore, yogi is not harassed or tormented or afraid or dared or the death is not a daring factor. It doesn't radiate fear in him. But for we commoners, death is very, very fearsome, fearful. So thank God we don't have it, but yogi needs it. And therefore, as I said, he can be carrying out death management, and that knowledge of death in respect to why, when, how, etc., comes to him by certain signals, what is called as portents. And that's how he will be knowing how the death is coming, where the death is coming, why the death is coming, etc. And then he can strategize and position himself more suitably to face the death much more comfortably, and also carry out the management. This is what the sutra is telling us about. The yogi has enormous wisdom. It is because of the samyama aspect, samadhi, prajna. This is such a great prajna that any knowledgeable person has no knowledge about the death. Might know that only that the death is certain, but the when and why and how about it is unknown. It is behind an iron curtain, howsoever one might be intelligent. So here we understand in samyama topic that how yogi gets jnana in true sense of the term, and how that helps him to be positioning himself in life. And most of these things are unknown to us, and we cannot be anticipating. And that is why our life is as unmanaged as it is, whereas his life is well managed, because he knows what is going to happen in the life. And there are so many other things that we will be seeing in samyama. We have seen already. So yoga is means of knowledge. And this means of knowledge or subject matter of knowledge doesn't come in our academical knowledge or any knowledge pursuit that worldly man carries out. The unique realm of knowledge is opened out for a yogi, and samyama topic will tell us about it. And this is one of those. Okay.
Now let's look at Vyasa's Bhashya. Vyasa begins by saying, Ayur vipakam karma vividam sopakramaṃ nirupakramaṃ cha. So this is something that we have seen. What is sopakramaṃ? What is nirupakramaṃ? Sopakramaṃ is that brings about the fruition right away. Nirupakramaṃ means it will bring it about after a long time. Now here specifically it is said, Ayur vipakam karma. So which karma? That karma whose fruition determines the ayu, the lifetime or the duration of the lifetime. If you remember in the second chapter, we had seen a sutra that had said, Satimulo tad vipakaha jati ayur bhogaha. So the fruition is in terms of jati ayuhu and the bhoga. So in the sense of which type of living being, what is the duration of the lifetime. So jati is which type of living being, where, etc. Where would the birth take place? What is the type of birth? Ayu is the duration of the lifetime. Bhoga is what are the various life experiences that will result. So these are the three types of fruition. Here specifically the Ayur Vipakam is being considered because this is about the Marana Jnanam, the Jnanam about the death, which is about the duration of the lifetime. So specifically, Jasa talks about that. So he says Ayur Vipakam Karma Dvividam Sopakramaṃ Nirupakramaṃ Cheti. Then he continues. Tatra, he continues by giving certain examples to help us understand what is this Sopakramaṃ, what is this Nirupakramaṃ. He says, Tatra yatha ardravastram vitanitam lagiyasa kalena shusyet tatha Sopakramaṃ. So if you have a wet piece of cloth and if it is laid out in a properly spread fashion, it will dry quickly. Similarly is the Sopakramaṃ, means it will fructify quickly. On the other hand, yatha cha tadeva sampinditam chirena samshusyet evam nirupakramam. So that same wet cloth it is not vitanitam. Suppose it is not spread, but it is made into a lump. That is sampinditam. If it is made into it is crumpled and made into a lump, then it is going to dry after a long time. Similarly is the case of Nirupakramam karma. So Vyasa is explaining these two through this example. He gives another example. He says, Yatha cha agnihi shushke kakshe mukto vatena samantato yuktaha kshepi yasa kalena dahet. So if you have fire, Agni, in a room containing dry hay, and which is on all sides there is plenty of supply of air or wind, the fire is going to catch quickly and spread everywhere. It is going to be blazing very soon. Kshepi yasa kalena, kshipraha kalaha. So very quickly it is going to burn. Similarly is the case of Sopakramam. On the other hand, yathava sa eva agnihi, that same Agni, trunarashau, if it is put on grass, a heap of grass which is not dry, regular, not hay, not dried hay, just grass. So trunarashau, kramataha avayaveshu nastaha chirena dahet, tatha nirupakramam. If it is a huge heap of grass, you have to light the fire in different places of that heap one by one, so that slowly it starts burning. So chirena, it takes a long time. It has to be lit in multiple places over and over. So kramataha avayaveshu, one by one in different parts. Kramataha avayaveshu nastaha, because it is sort of in some sense wet grass or grass that is not yet dried hay. It has to be slowly different parts of it. We attempt to light it, and over a long time it will burn. Slowly it will catch fire and burn. Similarly is the Nirupakramam karma. So through these two examples of the burning of hay or grass or the drying of wet cloth, Vyasa is bringing about an understanding of Sopakramam and Nirupakramam karma. So, Tadaika bhavikam ayushkaram karma dvividam. Sopakramam Nirupakramam cha. So similarly, Ekabhavikam ayushkaram karma. What is that? Ekabhavikam ayushkaram means avyavahita purva janmani sanchitam. So the karma that was collected in the previous jagma, in the previous birth or lifetime, will bring about fruition in these two ways, Sopakramaṃ or Nirupakramaṃ, depending on what nature it is. And that will determine the subsequent lifetime. So this is how Vyasa is explaining this to us. Now I have to sort of point to the previous discussion on karma, which was a very long, detailed discussion that we had with the Vyasa's explanation, etc., on how karma operates, what are the different type of karma, if you remember Drishta Janma Vedaniya, Adrishta Janma Vedaniya, etc. So with that background, here through simple example, Vyasa is explaining that the karma is of these two types. Then he says, tatsaṃyamādaparāntajñānamariṣṭebhyo va iti. So now he brings it back to the sutra. He says, through Sayyama on that, there is a knowledge of death or realization of death, or it can also come through the arishta, the portents, as it was mentioned, or the omen, so to speak. Through that also it may come. Vyasa mentions this because it has been clearly mentioned in the sutra by Patanjali as well. Now, since the arishta has been mentioned, he further goes on to also talk about the arishtas a little bit, even though it is a bit of a digression from the main topic of Sayyama. However, as we have seen in the Vibhuti Pada, there are two things happening. One is specific Sayyamas are mentioned along with their siddhis. At the same time, that context is utilized to give us more information, more knowledge of the various siddhantas. Like we saw that there was some knowledge of Shabda and some of the Vyakarana Shastra that we attained or we heard. So similarly, in this context, there is some further background information, etc. provided, and this is how things have been done in the Vibhuti Pada. So here he talks about the Arishta. So he says, Trividam Arishtam. So the Arishtas are also of three types: Adhyatmikam, Adibhautikam, Adidaivikam Cheti. If you remember, we have talked about the Dukkha. The Dukkha is also said to be of these three types: Adhyatmikam, Adibhautikam, and Adidaivikam. Similarly, it is for the omens or the portents. They are also Adhyatmikam, Adibhautikam, Adidaivikam. Adhyatmikam refers to one's own self. One's own self as in not the Purusha or the soul. Adhyatmikam is whatever is in one's own embodiment. It could be bodily, organs, prana, etc. All of that is Adhyatmikam. Adibhautikam refers to the other people, living beings, etc. Like animals, people, the general nature, the environment in which we live. That is the Adibhautikam. So the portents coming from that will be the Adibhautikam Arishtam. Then the Adidaivikam. Adidaivikam refers to sort of supernatural aspects. So the Arishtam is also categorized into these three. And Vyasa takes this context to talk about it and elaborate on that a bit further. So Vyasa says, Tatra Adhyatmikam. Now he talks about the Adhyatmikam Arishtam. He says, Ghosham Swadehe Pihita Karno Nashrunoti. So someone who is a Pihita Karnaha means he has closed his ears with his fingers, let's say. So the ears are shut using something like fingers. Normally, there is a ghosham, there is an inner sound that is heard. Now suppose it is not heard. So that is a certain portent, that is a certain omen, it is said. Ghosham sudehe pihita karnaha nishrunoti. Similarly, Jyotirva netre avashtabde navashyati. Now if the eyes are closed and let's say it is also say pressed with the palms, so closed. So normally there is a certain jyoti, a certain light that is seen, and often as children we play with that. We see, you close your eyes, you press it tight, you will see some light, some say golden point, blue point, etc. So if the Jyoti is not seen, then that is another portent. And these two types, or these two examples, are in the Adhyatmikam type of a portent. Because it is refers to one's own body coming from within. And the next is Tatha Adibhautikam. Yamapurushan pashyati. Pitrun Atitan Akasmat pashyati. So what is the Adibhautikam? So a person sees the Yama Purushas. The Yama is the god of death. So he is Yama. Yama Purushas are said to be the attendants or people who work for the god of death. In general, their job is to sort of carry somebody whose time has come to die. The Yama Purusha will come and, so to speak, take him away to the Yamaloka. So now, Yama Purushan Pashyati, if he sees all of a sudden, he thinks he has seen the Yama Purushas. Or Pitrun Atitan Akasmat Pashyati. His ancestors who have passed away, if he suddenly thinks he has seen them, then these are the Adibhautikam portents, which portend upcoming death, it is said. So these are the Arishtas, the Adhyatmikam and Adibhautikam. Similarly, Tatha Adidevikam. Swargam Akasmat Siddhan Va Pashyati. Viparitam Va Sarvam Miti. So he sees the Swarga or the Siddha Purushas or the Siddhas, or sees everything topsy-turvy. That is known as the Adidaivika portents or Arishta. The Viparita is elsewhere also described as Viparitam Va Sarvam Mahendra Jaladi Vyatirekena Grama Nagaradi Swarga Narakam Abhimanyate Manushyalokam Eva Devalokam Iti. So there is a different interpretation of Viparitam also given, where the Manushya-loka, the human world, is itself considered as Devaloka or the Swarga-loka by that person all of a sudden. That is the Viparitam Sarvam. So that is also a Adi Devika portent of upcoming death, it is said. So these are the different types of Arishtas. So Anena va janati aparantam upasthitam iti. Anena va, by this also. So the Sanyama has been described. Now the Arishtas have been described. It says by through Arishtas also one knows that the death is at hand. Aparantam upasthitam, the death is here. Now of course you would expect that the knowledge arising from Sanyama and the knowledge arising from Arishtas are of a different nature. Secondly, the Arishtas are not are not available only to yogis. They may be available to normal people as well. So then it is elaborated. Yadyapi ayoginam api arishtebhyo prayena tatsaṃyamādaparāntajñānam uppadyate. So even though for a yogi, somebody who is not a yogi, through the Arishtas, through these portents or omens, this kind of knowledge may arise. Tathapi, however, tesham samanyakarena tat samshaya rupam. So for the normal people who are only looking at the Arishtas, this knowledge is of a general nature, devoid of any specifics. And it is samshaya rupam. One wonders, I am not hearing the inner sound when I close my ears, or not seeing that light, something is different. Or suddenly I'm seeing my ancestors, which means the death may be close at hand. So it is samanyakarena samshaya rupam. One wonders, one is not sure. However, yoginam, through the Sanyama, yoginam deshakalataya pratyakshavat avyabhichari iti bhedaha. So for the yogis, it is as though they have a direct perception, direct realization in terms of all the specifics of desha, kala, etc., where, when, how, and with all the details, due to which karmas, of what nature, etc. So that direct realization and complete Shuddha Jnanam, the pure knowledge, untainted by doubt or inaccuracies. That is the nature of knowledge coming to the yogis. So this is how the Bhashya gives us more insight into what the sutra has said. So that is about 3.22.
So Vyasa is explaining what is Sopakrama and what is Nirupakrama. And he beautifully illustrates it for one to understand. So he gives the example like you have a wet cloth. With a wet cloth, so the water is completely squeezed out of it, and then you spread it and lay it on a surface. Then that cloth dries in a quicker time. Whereas if you keep the wet cloth in a lump form, it takes longer time to dry. And this is anybody's experience. So the cloth has been washed, but in the former case, it dries quickly. In the latter case, the same cloth dries at a later point in time, slower also. So that's how the karmas are of two kinds. One is like cloth washed and then spread or drying. The other one, cloth washed but not spread, but kept in a lump form for drying. So karmas are similarly of two kinds. Another example he gives about dry grass. When the dry grass is burnt, and if there is good amount of air available, then the fire quickly picks up and turns the dry grass into ash in a relatively immediately. While if the grass is fresh, green grass, fresh grass, we know that in green grass there is a lot of water, and therefore it will turn out a lot of smoke, and therefore that grass will not get burnt up quicker. So it takes longer time. The same fire takes longer time when it is burning wet and fresh grass, green grass. While shushka, the dry grass, quickly burns. The same fire quickly burns it out. So that's how there are two kinds of karmas explained with the illustration, so that we can understand how the two kinds of karmas are there. One slowly fructifying and one quickly fructifying. And with regards to this fructification of karma, their duration, another clarification is given that although there are three kinds of karma, we have seen in the Karma Siddhanta, Jati, Ayuhu, Bhogaha. So, out of the three, only two are considered here. Naturally, Jati is not something that can be considered in this classification. So, the Ayushkaram karma, the Jati, Ayu and Bhoga. Amongst those, Ayu and Bhoga are the two karmas which are to be considered in the Sopakrama, Nirupakrama classification. And that is clarified by Vyasa. Then, the Aparanta Jnana is, as you heard, it is pure Jnanam, knowledge about the death. So the Samyama gives knowledge about the death. Samyama on Sopakrama Nirupakrama tells the yogi about the death, oncoming death, upcoming death, as to where the death is taking place, when the death is taking place, in what condition, what situation, what scenario the death is going to take place. So as to facilitate yogi, as I said, for death management. We mortals are struggling for life management. But the yogi's life their life is well managed, but more than that, they also manage the death, which is so important for them. So that means they are having some access to condition the following life, next life. of which we commoners have no clue as to how our next life will be, because we do not know what is in store for this present life for us. And therefore, we will not be able to have any idea about prospective life, the following life, the next incarnation. Whereas the yogi is able to manage that because of the death management. So that the karmas will be well managed by the time the death comes up. Then about the aparanta, that's aparanta jnana, that is prayana jnana. Prayana means the last journey. The knowledge about the last journey as to the mode of it, the form of it, the condition of it, the process of it. And the courageous yogi who is a dhira purusha is not at all afraid of the death process, of the death time, whereas we all will be dreaded by knowing or having even some thought about our death process, imagination of death process, etc. We would be dreaded of it, whereas the yogi is not dreaded. He has that courage. Therefore, he is called dhira purusha. Then arishtas are adhyatmic, adibhutik, adidevik, which you heard just now. So adhyatmic arishtas means the sign of it, sign of death, time of death, etc. is perceived with assisting factor coming from very embodiment, which he gives the example. Like when you block our ears. Now we block our ears in order that we don't want to hear external sound. But when the ears are blocked, it is the time where actually we get the inner sound of life process. It's almost a sound like of a furnace. So if you plug our ears, we get the sound of a furnace. So also the case of eyes. If you don't want to see what is in front of us, we close our eyes. But when we close our eyes, we realize that we see a light. The shalaka, what is called as shalaka, rays of lights. When we close our eyes, we don't get utter darkness or absolute darkness, but we start seeing some light in our eyes. Now, if these things don't happen, then that is adibhautik kind of arishta. Then there is the adhyatmic arishta. Then he mentions about adibhautik arishta, which you heard just now from Srineet. What is adibhautik arishta? Then comes the adidaivik arishta, like viparita jnanam or swarga darshanam akasmat. This is very important. Akasmat, immediately. Or pitara jnanam, pitara, the mains, ancestors coming in our life whom we have not seen at all. So we do not have a situation to remember because we have not spent any time with our ancestors. So those ancestors who passed away before our death, we have no basis to remember them. But yet we remember. And that too suddenly. So such are the portents, adibhutik, adidevik, adhyatmic. And he makes a final statement which is also interesting, that sometimes even those who are non-yogis, they also get some indications. So common man who is a non-yogi may get indications, but the indications are not necessarily certain. There is lack of certainty factor in it. Whereas when it comes to yogi, it's like direct perception. The certainty is there absolutely. So sometimes a common man also gets some premonitions about that. But the case is that is maybe kind of thing. Maybe that is coming. Maybe that is around the corner, etc. So there is a certainty factor as absent. Whereas when it is samyama process, it is absolutely certain, and also as clear as a direct perception, pratyaksham, because that is yogaja pratyaksham in samyama. So common man also might get the aparanta jnanam, etc., but that is not having certainty factor in it. So there is some amount of doubt, lack of clarity, etc., and maybe factor. The maybe factor is there and not certainty about it. So point is that this knowledge of death is so important for a yogi, and we will not be able to imagine. The composure of a yogi is so strong that he doesn't get perturbed by death signals. Although we know that death is certain, the death signal is tormenting and quite fearsome. But for him it is not. And that is why he has a chance to manage the death properly. And that is so important for shaping the prospective life or putting a conditioner to prospective life. This is the privilege of a yogi. And for that purpose, he has this aparanta jnanam and also arishta jnanam. Okay.
Yes. So that is about Sutra 3.22. Now we move to the next Sutra 3.23, which talks about another Sayama, continuing in our series. So 3.23 is maitryādiṣu balāni. So this sutra refers back to the sutra that we have already seen in the context of chitta parikarma, if you recollect. So this is, and therefore it says maitryādiṣu, so that it is already known to us. So if you remember, we had seen maitri karuna mudito pekshanam sukadukka punya vishayānam bhavanatas chitta prasadanam. So to bring about chitta prasadanam, as one in the series of chitta parikarma, we had seen that maitri, karuna, mudita and upeksha. Maitri refers to the feeling of friendship, karuna, the feeling of empathy, mudita is joy, upeksha is indifference. With respect to whom? With respect to sukha, dukkha, punya vishayānam. So maitri with respect to somebody who is experiencing happiness or joy. Karuna, sympathy, empathy with someone experiencing sorrow. Mudita, joy with respect to someone who is doing meritorious work, punya. And indifference, upeksha, with respect to someone who is doing non-sanctioned, non-meritorious, sinful deeds. So that was something that was covered in the first chapter in the context of chitta parikarma. So here, in the context of vibhuti or siddhis and sanyama, it says maitryādiṣu balāni, Sutra 3.23. So when sanyama on maitri, etc., the corresponding power or the corresponding bala is the siddhi that the yogi attains. So this is Sutra 3.23.
So it is mentioning about balas, and this is fascinating aspect that yogi has certain balas. In our times, we speak about certain cards, debit card, credit card, etc., etc. Now, the yogi has certain cards with him. He develops certain cards, like Maitri card. Now, what is that Maitri card? Many times we want to make friends with someone, but we fail to do that. We don't have the power to make someone as friend whom we want to make friend. And that's why we have certain problems in our life. We want to be friendly with someone or make someone friendly with us, and that doesn't happen, howsoever frantically we try. But yogi has like cards, Maitri card, and he can swipe the Maitri card and he can actualize the friendliness. So wherever something depends upon friendliness, we know that certain things will happen in our life. If someone is friendly, particular person is friendly to us, and we have friendliness with that person, then we have the privilege and we can have advantage of something that we want to happen can happen. If the person is not friendly to us and we don't have friendliness with that person, then it doesn't facilitate and help our dreams come true. And that's why many times we say I am at a disadvantage because such a person is not friend, or such a thing is not friend. Such a thing is not friendly with me. Such an animal is not friendly with me. But then if the animal is friendly with you, and if you are in the forest, and if you have friendliness with the lion is not going to torment you, harass you, and finish you. So this is the card which comes handy to yogi. Like we are all used to in our days, credit card and debit card and various cards, bank cards, etc. So we can swipe the cards and get our things done with the help of cards, swiping a card. So yogi is having so many cards with him. One of them is Maitri card. So wherever friendliness is needed, friendliness is going to be bountiful. He can swipe the friendliness card and friendliness can be established. And that will be a great advantage. So also Karuna card. Many times we want empathy or we want to have empathetic to someone. But somehow we cannot be empathetic to a particular person and therefore we don't get into good books of that person. Or we want empathy for ourselves and we cannot be getting the sympathy from the society around or people around the person around us. Whereas the yogi has this card of bala, karuna bala. So maitri bala, karuna bala, mudita bala. So this, for us to comprehend, I would like to suggest these are something like cards with which we are familiar. A card of friendliness, card of compassion, card of complacency, happiness. Many times someone has become happy, but we cannot be happy by that person becoming happy. And therefore we expose the malais in us. Our malais gets exposed with regards to that person because we just cannot be expressing delight with that person being happy or that person being successful. We cannot express the happiness. And therefore, it shows the malignity within us in our minds, that we have malign mind. And that gets exposed in such situations. Whereas the yogi has all these things at his fingertips. So we only know about the cards with respect to some money, currencies and money, that we have cards. But here, yogi has cards, maitryādiṣu. So which are the different balas that we need in life can be imagined. And then we feel that, oh, I should have had this quality. Then I would have it at advantage. I do not have this quality card. I don't have this quality nor even quality card. And therefore I'm at disadvantage. So we can imagine how many kinds of cards we will be requiring in our life. And there are many things that we feel, if I were with this quality, if I had this quality, etc., etc. And we are deprived of it just because we don't have those qualities. But in the sutra here, we are suggested about those qualities that we can be really swiping those cards like we swipe the cards, debit cards and credit cards and ATM cards. And then we can have the manifestation of those powers with which we are in badly need, and then we can be encashing on those. So there is maitryādiṣu, means Maitri card, Karuna card, Mudita card, and not the Upeksha card. The Upeksha cannot be here, which commentary is going to clarify. But this is an interesting samyama which tells us about the wallet of a yogi. Okay. What do we have in our wallets? Maybe some currencies or some bank cards, credit cards and debit cards, etc., gold cards, etc. But the yogi's wallet has these cards so that they come very handy whenever he is in badly need of those, or just in need of those, he can be using those. So it's a very fascinating siddhi, the concept of bala, maitri bala. He needs so many, buddhi bala, bhavana bala. We lack so many balas. And we need something like that, which we do not have in modern dynamics of life available. We can, as I said repeatedly, we can have only cash card, credit card, ATM cards, debit cards, etc., code cards, etc., and not these qualitative cards. Yogi is endowed with qualitative cards. Somewhere he needs courage. And this happens. We need courage at some situation and we lack it there. We don't have it. We don't have sufficient. But nobody gives us credit on courage. Nobody says, I will lend you some courage and you go and do your job. Nobody lends courage. People can lend money. They cannot lend intelligence. They cannot lend some sentiment, bhavana, intelligence, dhairya, etc., courage, etc., valor, etc. And we are exposed that we do not have those powers. We may not be having the powers, but we can carry the power cards, which is a fascinating kind of power which this chapter is mentioning. Anyway, it's very, very fascinating to just ponder over this concept of balas. Buddhi bala, jnana bala, sharira bala, manasa bala, bhavanik bala, dhairya bala, shaurya bala, etc., etc. We need so many powers in our life. And we miserably fail in our life dynamics because we don't have them. Because we don't have credit card facility. Nobody lends. There is no overdraft facility. There is no cash credit facility which the banks offer with respect to money. Nobody offers this. But we can imagine there is bank of courage, bank of wisdom, bank of intelligence, bank of tolerance, bank of friendliness, bank of karuna, bank of mudita. And there are so many banks available in the nature, in the treasury of the nature. And yogi is able to have those balas. That's a great endowment to have in life. And that is why the karma dynamics of a yogi are totally different, because he has so many cards with him. So he can borrow courage, etc. He can borrow wisdom, etc. Or somebody lends, the bank will be lending him. These banks will be lending. So there is much to imagine in this particular sutra. But anyway, I leave the imagination to you. Okay.
So let's stop for today and we'll look at the Bhashya in the next session. Let's recite the shlokas on Guruji and stop for today. Vaijñānikam pravaktritva asaneshu kalavidam yogābhyāse cha tattvajñam vandeham sundaram gurum yoga vruksho hi lokesmin yat preranena vardhitah yogacharya guru tubhyam sundaraya namo namaha. Thank you.
Namaskar, all of you.